Hello, and thanks for joining me for the last in this current planned live streams. To be saying, I think I've added a new definition to winging it tonight, but it's don't be put off. It's going to be a great one because it's walks with nature, which I'm really excited about. I only started doing the events this time last year, and they were I really enjoyed them, and everyone who came along really enjoyed them as well. So I'm really excited about sharing them and sharing some ideas for the future for walks with nature. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the photos from those walks and from some of those ideas. So let me start to share the screen again. I will carry on doing these talks because they're good for me to get a little bit better at it. I'm aware that I forget to put the mute on at the start, so I want to keep practicing those kind of things. So let's get started anyway. So thanks for joining me. If you're new, you won't be used to my freestyling style, if you like. But forgive me because I am still getting used to it, but it's getting better, I think. Let's present this. Okay, here we go. Perfect. So walks with nature. So we've for people who didn't join in the previous talks, we've done a bit of a mix and a match of some talks that are about photography. Some talks are about some of the events I do, and just sharing photos really, and talking, and hopefully inspiring people to discover what's on their doorstep with their own cameras. And that's very much what walks with nature is about. And the idea of it is to explore. It's less about going out with a camera, and it's more about sort of immersing yourself in nature and sort of connecting with it and feeling part of that. So it's not about photography, even though people come with cameras, and I'll usually take my camera with me. We don't sort of put that pressure, if you like, of having to think about what you're doing with the camera. It's more about just like, if you want to take a picture, take a picture. If you want to just sit and enjoy what's going on and just walk and experience what's happening, you can do that as well. So there's no pressure on any of that kind of photographic pressure of capturing the moment and things like that. It's all about just enjoying it and feeling relaxed and really interacting with your surroundings. And it's also one of the things, you do get quite a lot of wildlife workshops and tours and workshops and tours that really focus on a particular species. And while I might suggest that in some of the titles of the walks with natures, it's really what I like to get behind is a sense of place and a sense of location. So while we may, like for example, we look for owls and we look for otters and kingfisher and things like that, with nature there's no guarantee that you're going to see any of these things, but it's about setting yourself up in a good position to see those things, but also appreciating what is there. And with this kind of before we start, it's always about that sort of opening yourself up to see the wider ecosystem, not just about what a star species, if you like, might. And some of my real highlights from the walks with natures were, as I'll show and share with you, were these events and these experiences that were nothing to do with what we originally set out to do. So it's very much about place. So that's why a lot of these walks are places that I know really well and places that I experience regularly, because I have that deeper connection and understanding with the surroundings and the wildlife that uses it. And with each of these walks, it's very much about trying to practice good techniques in observing nature and being part of nature, not chasing it, not getting, over enthusiastic, which we can all do. It's understandable, but it's about sort of just taking a step back and seeing if we can create a scenario and an environment where nature feels comfortable with us with us in that environment. So that's very much what it's about. And so I hope that sets the scene for you, if you like. And now I'm going to whiz through an overture of walks that I've already done and some walks that I want to do that I haven't done yet, walks with nature. We're going to start off on the moors because that's one that's coming up next month. We walk over the moors and experience the nature that's happening on the moors above my village. This is the view over Lower Wagtail from the moors. And still Lower Wagtail, a bit further up on Ilkley Moor from Burley Moor, looking more towards the Dales area on a lovely kind of evening. I often use this photograph as an example of why we're going straight into photography already, but a great example of why when you're a photographer you should always still go out when you're grey. This was when it's grey surrounded. This was a really dull grey day, but I still was out, and we were there, and then suddenly for the last half an hour or so you enjoy a stunning light and a stunning landscape, which really beautiful and enjoyable. So, you know, if you're not out there in whatever conditions, you never kind of you'd never kind of get this opportunity, I don't think. And talking of conditions, you know, especially up on the moor, it can be really interchangeable weather. You can get sun beams of light coming through, you can get showers and wind and all sorts of stuff. And you know, the more iconic scene of this moorland landscape is the heather, but there's so much more to this environment and landscape than just the heather. We get some grazing, some sheep. Again, we're looking down over my the village that I live in there, Burley and Wagtail. There's some more sheep, and it's the, you know, the light and the textures and this mix of habitats on the moor that make it a really interesting place and a diverse place for wildlife and nature as well. Lots of different kind of vegetation and plant and flora, and it's a really good habitat for a great sort of ecosystem to support even the bracken and the fern, which can be a problem for moorland when it can be very invasive, but even that provides habitat for other animals, things like deer, and reptiles and amphibians may use that for shelter in the from the elements and stuff as well. You quite often find different types of wildlife hiding in this bracken area, and then obviously the heather as well, which is you know, the iconic symbol, if you like, of the moors. And talking of iconic symbols, the red grouse obviously is the star, or the, what's the word, the key species. You know, it's a habitat built to keep red grouse really. Well, I'll get into the politics of that. People have different viewpoints, and that's all good, but I love the red grouse. It's a beautiful bird. I love those red eyebrows, and when, I should have put a picture in it actually, but when you see their eyebrows go up, there's a better name for it, a more scientific name for it, I can't remember it right now, and they breed in these in the heather and in the surrounding areas on the bilberry here, and you can see the chicks in spring. And of course we're going to be exploring this landscape in April, or the first walk on the moor is going to be in April, and in April is such a interesting month. You can get every type of weather up on the moors in April, including snow, which, you know, is a really quite cool thing when you get a bit of snow, and birds are getting ready to breed really, and it's you know, it's quite an interesting environment to explore. And it's not just red grouse you can find on the moor. You can find grey partridge, which is quite an exciting bird to see. Not easy to see, but you can certainly see them on the moor, as you can see here, a male and a female. And they were quite shy, the grey partridge. Certainly less seen than the red-legged partridge that were introduced. And as well as the grouse and the partridge, you can also see curlew. Curlew breed on the moors here, and it's a fantastic sight to see the curlews. They're a really big bird on the landscape, and you can see them sometimes on the rocks overhead, and certainly flying around, particularly during the breeding season. Very noisy bird. You can see this one's calling out, and actually you can see, because this is still snow here, you can see the light hitting the snow and bouncing up and underlighting the curlew. Quite often this would be a sort of almost a silhouetted shot, but because you've got that light hitting the snow and the snow's reflecting it, it really illuminates the birds really nicely, nice and well. You can do a similar thing with the sea as well, actually, because the sea's quite reflective. So when you're out on a boat or something like that, you can see here another one calling over. I like this one because it kind of this shot just reminds me of a hummingbird. And if you see a curlew in real life, they really are quite big birds, and to think of a curlew in the shape of a hummingbird, I find that quite an interesting sort of shot, an unusual positioning in flight for a curlew, and a more common one there, but I love that. And it's not just curlews. You can see this April and this spring breeding on the moorland. You will see oyster catchers, redshank near the waters, snipe as well. Lots of a real eclectic mix of ground nesting birds that use this habitat to breed in the spring. Skylarks and pipits as well, meadow pipits also like to breed in this moorland area. And one of the things that I won't have a photo of, but hopefully this year I will, is a cuckoo. And cuckoos love meadow pipit nests, and you can hear the cuckoos. So hopefully in April we'll at least hear them, and with a bit of luck we'll see them as well. Really iconic, and a bird really in trouble. The cuckoo numbers go down each year, so really important to treasure them and look after them if we can, and appreciate them while they're here as well. Another bird that comes over, migrates over for the spring and the summer, is the wheatear. Really beautiful, sort of really delicately striking kind of bird, if you can be delicately striking. I guess you can, I think. But I love wheatears, and a lot of people do. Oh, star species alert. Oh man. Ring ouzel, yeah, so not an easy bird to see. A lot of people's tick lists, and you can tick that ring ouzel box on the moor if you're lucky, like I have here. Really awesome birds, and a lot of people really love seeing the ring ouzel up on the moor. And here is a pair as well, as you can see on Burley Moor this is, and they really are quite special birds. They're very cool. So hopefully we'll see them. And where there's ground nesting birds, there's raptors and predators. And here's a shot of two opportunists, the red kite and the kestrel. And the red kites will come over the moor more frequently in this period, in this ground nesting period, because they'll be looking for easy targets for prey, as will the kestrel, as will sparrowhawk as well. So lots of raptors. So as always, guys, I'm not very good at. I'm sure there's a special technique of reading comments and questions that come up as I'm talking. I'm not in that place. So I'm just talking, and either later tonight or tomorrow, I will start to go through the comments and answer any questions that you may have. And so this is the sight that you don't want to see if you're a ground nesting bird, of a red kite looming above you, and you're helpless in a nest. Oh, geez, yeah, that must be a terrifying sight, but a cool shot nonetheless. And that's the great thing about being on the moors, is when you're on the moors and the red kites are active, you do tend to get quite a nice different experience, and you can get eye to eye with them because you're on that height, and sometimes you get plateaus below you, and all these sort of different height level, what's the word, but you know, you're all at different height levels, and you can see above the kite, sometimes you're under them, and sometimes you're eye to eye, and it's a great environment to watch kites, because they're quite often, we're used to seeing them gliding around and doing whatever in the distance or whatever, but this is an environment where they're very active, they've got on a different gear, they're diving down looking for food, they'll have their own young and they'll be building their own nests as well, and so it's a very different sort of game watching the red kites on the moors. It's a really great one, actually. Great place to see them. And it's not just about the birds as well. We've got the common lizards, which are kind of tricky to see, but you can see them, and they're really stunning, and they can look really vibrant as well. Some of them are very different in color appearance sometimes. And a load of insect life as well. So the moor supports a great amount of different insects, from bees, loads of different types and species of bees. I can't even begin to go through them, but and butterflies. I've seen tiger moths. What's what is hair streak? Green hair streak is a really cool one to see. It's kind of iridescent, and loads of butterflies and moths and things like that, which are always an added bonus and help keep that. You know, they're the building blocks of that ecosystem on the moorland as well. So it's important to remember them, acknowledge them, and enjoy them when we're out on our walk. And that's the moors, looking at the moors. And now we're going to move on to one that is in the following month, in May, which I think, from what I remember, is called, you think I remember, My Home Patch or something like that. And the idea of exploring my home patch, I mean, it kind of all is my home patch, all these walks with nature, bar one or two, they're all relatively close. But the home patch one it's about exploring environments where urban, suburban environments meet the more rural and countryside kind of areas. And it's looking at those kind of borders between the two during spring, so we get to see, you know, it at its busiest, life at its busiest in this kind of hinterland, if you like, where the urban suburban areas meet the rural areas, and it's right on my doorstep. It's if you saw my talk on Sunday about the Sun Lane area, which is about to be it's just been approved for building. It takes in that part of our village as well. So you sort of it's on the right edge of the village, and you kind of explore that, and you see that environment where which is very residential, and one that's very rural and you know, countrysidey. That'll do. and it's a really fascinating mix, and as a result you get a real eclectic mix of wildlife and nature as well. There you go. You sort of see this is you know, describing that kind of borderline, if you like, a fairly modern housing estate meeting meadow, a flower meadow. And there's plenty of flora around at this time, including lots of blossoms, potentially some orchids as well. As we explore that, lots of bees and yeah, like I say, blossoms. So loads of pollination going on for the pollinators, and those flowers coming up as well. So it's a real full-on spring in your face, loads of stuff going on, which is great, including these little mining bees, tawny miney bees, which are fantastic and really enjoyable to see, including butterflies as well. There'll be a good amount of butterflies out. Hopefully the orange tips will still be out as well, which are when we first moved to Burley and Wharfdale, and I first went up to that Sun Lane spot, it was one of the first sort of species I remember seeing and getting really excited about, seeing these orange tips in the sun, in the early evening sun. It was just fantastic. And we'll be enjoying sort of nesting and breeding birds that we recognize as well, hopefully seeing them foraging for food, maybe even some fledglings potentially for the early breeders. Nuthatch, that's a fledgling there, young nuthatch that we've got on a fence post, and we'll be doing a lot of listening as well. So as we explore these in any environments, any of the walks with nature, we do a lot of listening, and we start, and by doing that, you start to recognize, you can start to recognize bird calls. Chiff chaff is an iconic one, and many of the warblers, robins, nuthatch is what I was talking about. That's a really distinctive call, and the great thing about doing that is when you hear birds first and you're wondering what it is, it helps you remember it and recognize it in the future. And especially in the spring, when the foliage is all out and in full bloom, you tend to hear these birds before you see them. And then you start to search for them and you can hear the call. And then when you see them, you make that connection, and it can help you identify bird song in the future. And it can help you sort of work out what you might be looking at. Another fantastic bird singer is the wren. You wouldn't believe the volume when, you might hear something like ear-piercingly loud, and then you look and you're looking and it's this tiny bird in a verge or in a hedge somewhere, belting it out. It really is quite unbelievable, actually. And another stunner that will breed in this spring is the bullfinch. Great. And hopefully we'll get some nice close-up experiences with some jays and other birds like them, like the magpies as well. This is a great bird to watch, the tree creeper. They tend to spiral around these trees, and you can see that they'll dig into little bits of bark and under the bark, and they'll nest underneath sort of between the bark and a tree. So a tree like this would be a good nesting site for a tree creeper. Have a nest in there and go between there and take grubs and insects back to that. And they're really quite cool to watch, and you can sit and watch them for a few minutes if you find them. They're usually fairly tolerant of people as well. So that's the other thing that I was going to say. So with the walks with nature, we tend to keep the groups quite small, because obviously the bigger you are as a group, the more obvious you are, and the harder it is to sort of blend into the background, if you like. And so we try and keep it small. But birds like this, you can really enjoy. You just sit back or stand back and just watch them working their way from tree to tree, gathering bits of food, and they're really real joy to watch. Scattered all around wherever we go on this walk will be house sparrows, but they're really joy to watch. Their behavior is just fun, energetic. They remind me of people that I know who don't stop, never stop, like keep going, and they're always busy. Even though that one's just chilling out that one's having a dust bath there, but they are non-stop. As well as the house sparrows, we've got the tree sparrows, which is again, as I said on Sunday, were really rare, real decline. I think it was like over a 90% decline a good few years ago, and so they were in real trouble. They very nearly disappeared, and now they're slowly coming back in small areas. And actually Sun Lane is one of those areas where you can see the tree sparrows, and as you can see, they breed here on the site that we walk around. So they're pretty good. And there's a magpie building a nest there as well, and they're fantastic birds to watch. And birds like magpies and crows and stuff can be great to watch, because there's usually a bit of trouble or mischief going on near them, because the other birds tend to get a bit nervous with magpies, jackdaws and corvids and stuff like that. one of my favourite ones, which we would inevitably encounter on this walk, is the long-tailed tit. And on many of the walks that we do, actually, it tends to pop up. And one of my favourites, they remind me of those kind of Nerf balls that you throw, you know, with the tails at the end, and you throw them, and they're fantastic kind of birds. And their nests, if you're lucky enough to find one, they are woven together. There's moss and lichen, tiny bits of lichen, all woven together with spider webs. So they're really flexible, and they're like a little dome with a hole in. You can see here how tiny that kind of the lichen and the moss and webs that they're collecting. You can see the attention that goes into it. Just that little tiny bit in its beak, it just gets added to that. And I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the thousands of feathers that they pluck out. They don't pluck it out. They find them in the environment, and they will line the nest with 1,000 feathers. It must be one of the coziest nests that you can find, and they can have several broods over the spring and the summer. So it's totally conceivable that you could see fledglings. They have quite a few. I'm trying to think of the most I've seen in once, of sort of 5 or 6, I think is the most I've seen. Whether that's a merged group or not, I don't know, but they're not quite as cute as the adults, I don't think. But they're cool nonetheless, and they're quite noisy as well. So you can find those. And then obviously there's a ton of butterflies on the walk, as I've already said, including the common blue, which is a really quite striking butterfly. Really, I mean, that's really beautiful, isn't it? And as we sort of walk on the borders of fields and around, and possibly depending on basically the routes planned based on what I've noticed. So we could find ourselves down by the water, we could be walking through houses, or we could be walking through or on the edges and boundaries of fields, depending on what's more interesting and what's going on. But we'll see things like house martins and swallows and swifts, and you know, real birds that all birds that are in trouble, but really iconic of particularly of summer and spring. But they're really, you know, their numbers are going down, and they're another bird that we really should celebrate and enjoy more, because they really are it's so beautiful watching them hoovering up insects over the fields and the grasslands and stuff, and then sometimes higher up, depending on where the insects are, basically. And then if we're really lucky, we may run into some deer, some roe deer, who frequent the fields in the area as well, and the woodlands, and they'll give birth in long grassy areas or in bracken, so places where it's really sheltered and they're safe. They feel safe and hidden away from dangers. Not that they actually have too many dangers other than people and dogs, I think. Yeah, they're really beautiful to watch, and if we get lucky, we may see some deer. And we saw the curlews up on the moor, but we get curlews nesting in the lowlands as well. The curlews in the moorlands tend to be more successful at breeding. There's a lot more pressures on curlews in the lowland, in the lower areas, like so the fields. Obviously to do with farming and people walking, dogs, all those kind of different pressures, predators like cats and foxes. Also, all additional pressures on these on the curlew that nest in the fields. And like the curlews in the moorlands, they're big, they're noisy, and they're just great fun to watch, and really exhilarating bird to watch, actually, full of action, full of attitude, and really quite a charismatic bird to enjoy. And we're lucky to enjoy them all year round in different ways and different behaviours. You know, in the winter they form larger flocks, and which is built up from Scandinavian birds that come over, and then in the spring and the summer the other birds will return to their other breeding grounds. They're quite loyal. They have loyal to their nest sites, so the curlews will be nesting year after year in the same place. And here's a young curlew. Here, as well as curlew in the area, we'll see some lapwing, and the lapwing are just really quite remarkable birds. Their noise is as extraordinary, if not more extraordinary, because it's more like a sci-fi sort of sound that they make, and their flight displays are incredible. And if there's any predator in the area, they will just be straight on it, like you know, like an X-wing fighter or something. They're just brilliant. They're like fantastic birds to watch, and they breed on the fields around as well. And you will see these again in the lowlands and up on the moors as well. So in the fields and on the moors. So they're a great bird to see. And we obviously get the odd visitor, the odd flyby. We might see the heron, the buzzard causing chaos, and the one that they might all fear a bit is the sparrowhawk, very busy during during the spring and the breeding season. Definitely a character to be avoided if you're a young fledgling. And another one to avoid as well is the kestrel, which you can also see. And if we're really, really, really lucky, we may run into a barn owl as well. As you can see, we're still on that hinterland that I was talking about, that border where the suburbs meet the rural areas, and you can see there from the house in the background that we could run into a beautiful barn owl. Small chance, but there's still a chance we might see it. So then after May, we go into June, and we go into one of my favourite landscapes, and that is Malham and Malham Dale in the Yorkshire Dales. And there is so much to Malham that to feel excited and inspired about, and it's a place I'm really looking forward to getting back to and exploring. And again, a lot of diverse landscape around Malham, and you've got these kind of fields that feel a little bit like ancient fields. They don't feel like they've changed much in hundreds and thousands of years, which is a great habitat for lots of different wildlife and nature. And this is a shot as we enter a glacial forest, so a forest that's been around since, or woodland that's been around since the Ice Age. And it is just a special place to walk around and experience nature in. And you can see here the stream, or the beck, that leads up to that famous and iconic cove in Malham. That's Malham Cove there. That is really beautiful views. And the flowers, you know, there's a load of wildlife, but the flowers there are incredible as well. There's a real diverse range of specialist flowers. In fact, I forgot to put a few in there that I took last year. There really is some cool stuff to explore. I mean, you could literally spend a couple of hours per square meter, I think, exploring all the different wildlife, different flora and different details in that environment. It really is quite a special and inspiring place. And as you move along the beck, you can see things like dippers. There is kingfisher. I haven't got a shot of a kingfisher in this environment. I always miss it. I've never got it. There's also a barn owl in the area that I've got one shot. It's not good enough to put in here, but if you're really lucky, if you can get a glimpse of a kingfisher or barn owl in this environment too, which is great. But you do tend to see the dipper. You do tend to see the heron. And you see the other birds like pied wagtails and grey wagtails, buntings, reed bunting, a wren. I think that's quite a young fledgling wren, I think, there. as well. And on the cove itself is littered with house martin nests, and you will see swifts come in and lick salt off those rocks as well. And it's quite an incredible sight to just stand underneath the cove looking up and watching all the birds coming in, feeding their young. There you go, there's a house martin there, not in a house but on a cliff edge, which is their traditional nesting sites, which is fantastic really. You'll get goldfinches as well, and more exciting species like the spotted flycatcher, which are fantastic to watch. You watch them, they'll do a little loop and they'll usually land back on the same perch. So they'll go around, do a little loop and try and catch something and then land. So if you're photographing them and you're struggling to capture them, one of the things you can do is focus on the perch that it keeps returning to. Hopefully. They do change perch from time to time if they're not successful, but if they're successful, as long as they're successful, they'll keep looping back round, and it's a cool thing to watch. A flycatcher, they're great and a real good habitat to see the flycatchers. Here's our wheatear again, which quite prolific. Malham's probably the place where I see the most the biggest numbers of wheatear in Malham that I've been to. And you know, I've already said, what did I say? Delicately striking or something like that. And they are beautiful. I really love them. Just not as much as I love red stars, which I absolutely love. Look at that. That's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And Malham is a great place to see them as well. And last year there were quite a few. I was really excited to see so many red stars. Really striking bird, that. Not delicately striking, just blooming striking those. And here's a young one with the mother in the background with that red tail you can see there. Really cool. There's a female there. And the jackdaws, which are really, what's the word? Mischievous, maybe. That's probably not the right word, but they're great. And you tend to think they're something else. Tend to think there might be a peregrine falcon or something, but usually it's the jackdaw, and they're great fun to watch. They're very, they'll fly on the gusts coming up the cove, and they're very aerobatic. Really great to watch them their flights, because they're quite exciting. And another iconic, or not iconic's not the word, but you know, a bird that a lot of people go to Malham to try and see is the green woodpecker. And here's a young fledgling here, or a green woodpecker, just on the moor. And yeah, they're quite cool, aren't they? They're really good to see. And there's our friend the little owl after a sort of late afternoon snack there. And obviously with loads of ground nesting birds around, you see weasels as well. And if you're lucky, a fox, or not if you're a ground nesting bird, you're not lucky to see a fox. But the real predator that really steals the show in this area at this time of year. So we time this nature walk, or try and time it perfectly with the fledglings of the peregrines. So the peregrines become really active. There's been a nest, I don't even know how many years, but as many years as I know, there's been a nest on Malham Cove with the peregrines, and they are absolutely, I mean, breathtaking to watch. They really are. They just steal the show, absolutely. With their flights, they come in so fast. In a stoop, they can go up to 200 miles an hour. They do these food passes, and then if you're lucky, you might just steal a glimpse of a young fledgling here, just chilling out, waiting for mum or dad to return with a snack for it to eat, and then it will call out, or the parent will call out, and they'll fly out to grab some lunch. And there's the lunch there, and yeah, I mean, I can't even describe how special it is to see peregrines up in this place. It's really quite incredible, and really, a real privilege. They really are quite breathtaking, is the word. Moving on to Malham. I'll check the time. I'll make sure it won't keep you too long. I think we're running to time. It's all good. And so this is one that was really successful, actually. Went really well last year, and I added a few extra dates as a result. And this is the sort of owls tour. But as I said at the beginning, it's not just about the owls. It's about experiencing all the other elements and all the other experiencing the habitat and all the other creatures and nature and wildlife that inhabit that habitat. And you know, there's all sorts of things to just sort of, you know, just absorb and let sink in, and really relaxing walks and really great company with people as well. It's just, I really enjoyed these walks. And one of the things that happened on one of them was this kind of, I don't know what it was. It was a kind of butterfly show where it was sort of a mass breeding sort of competition or something. These tortoise shells, and they were all chasing each other. And I hope it happens again this year, because I wasn't quite ready for it, and I didn't quite capture it as well as I'd like to. But I think hopefully it will happen again this year, and I've got a few ideas of how I will approach that. In terms of, I know some people like me to share some photography tips, and I know I said it was about the wildlife and not photography, but one of the things you can do, quite often you'll see butterflies return to a similar spot, a similar plant, or a similar spot on a wall or something. So one of the things you can do is pre-focus on one of those spots and wait. So tripod can help with things like that. So you could set your tripod there, and then you might be able to catch a butterfly in flight. In terms of shutter speed, you definitely want to be using a fast shutter speed, like something like 2,000th of a second, really. So you want a nice sunny day. But you know, just walking around and seeing it was just fantastic. It was quite extraordinary, really, seeing lots and lots of butterflies just chasing each other over these walls. It's really special. And in the fields, we again have these ground nesting birds like the lapwing moving around, and the curlew again. So can you tell that I quite like curlews? There's quite a few curlew shots. And watching the curlews was fantastic, actually. And I, in a way, in this area, I got to sort of see them a lot better than I do in some other areas as well. So it was really a real privilege. And this here was a real highlight. It's the success rate of the curlew is very small. In some places, it's less than 1% success rate. So to see two young fledglings was just really exciting, working their way across this field here. Mum just behind the horse, mum or dad just behind the horse. So I really hope they made it. I think, you know, they're big enough that they should have done. And they're fantastic. So that was one of my favorite things to happen, especially on that walk. And sometimes you see deer as well, which was a nice surprise to sort of encounter them on the walk. Looking for owls, remember. So we haven't even got onto the owls yet. And here, you know, obviously where there's ground nesting birds, as I've already suggested, there's predators. I just quite like this photo. You've got a buzzard. I suspect it's a crow. I think it's a crow. And then a jackdaw, as opposed to a raven. I think it's a crow. And a jackdaw, all in a nice line, in nice size order as well. And in the next shot, a magpie decides to join in the fun, join in the chase, which I just, it was a great, you know, there's always these, that's the thing, if you come in with an open mind, there's all sorts of things that can happen and you can enjoy and appreciate. You know, the worst thing you can do on these walks is go in with your tunnel vision looking for particular species. So we were here at this part of the walk, we'd be looking for little owls, which would normally be sort of head height on the hedgerows and on the stone walls. So if you're just concentrating on that sort of thing right in front of you, looking for little almost like fluffy tennis balls on a fence post. You're going to miss these moments, which are great. And so it's keeping that open mind and enjoying whatever comes your way, including a beautiful kestrel in the beautiful evening light. And then obviously we saw one of our star species that come out during the day as well, so particularly in the late afternoon, early evening, the little owl. Oh, went a bit. There's a young fledgling there. So as the summer went on, the little young fledglings started to come out tentatively. And they're great birds. They are really enjoyable to look at and watch. And then obviously as the sun starts to go down, so this is a walk that goes on into the early evening, just as well, this is sort of summertime now, so I guess it's late evening, sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock, something like that. And you've got those horses in the field. The jackdaws start to look for somewhere to roost, catching the last light, and you start to see more and more little owls around coming out in the evening, and more owls until, if you're really lucky, and we had a relatively good success rate of seeing barn owls on this walk, which is probably what made it a bit popular. But we were looking at, it's important to probably point out that we weren't looking for a nesting site or anything like that. You got to they're a Schedule 1 bird, barn owls, which means you're not to interfere with anything really with a Schedule 1 bird. We would just put ourselves in a situation in a field that they were likely to hunt over, and just waited, and we stayed in the hedgerow and just made sure we didn't disturb. You can see there's nothing disturbed about this barn owl. It's flying straight towards us, no bother at all, looking for a little vole to catch. And that was a great walk, really, really enjoyable. And like I said, we did a few of those, and it was a really successful one over the summer. Now this next one I've merged into I've merged two nature walks actually. So we did a sort of Kingfisher walk. So we kind of looked for kingfisher. We looked at kingfisher habitats, their habits and ways we can sort of go approach. So like all these walks, it's about giving you the ideas of how to look for these things, how to observe nature, and then you can take that with you. So whether we see a kingfisher or not, or an otter, it doesn't matter, because we'll see lots of stuff, and you'll be more clued up for finding them and seeing them in the future when you're out walking in a habitat that they might be in. So I've merged this all together, and there's a few different river sort of walk ideas, but hopefully you'll get the idea of anyway. And so we're predominantly on the Wharf. Well, we are on the Wharf. The walk can change a little bit depending on where I'm getting the most sightings of kingfisher or otter. They both can travel quite fair distances for food and searching, so they have quite big ranges. So wherever I'm seeing them more often is the area that we kind of concentrate on. And it's a beautiful river, and it's surrounded great surroundings. And one of the things with the Wharf is it's one of the fastest changing rivers in terms of depth in Europe, I think, and that can make it a bit tricky actually, because sometimes it's the river water level's really high, and sometimes it's really low, which can affect how kingfisher and otter hunt. But the great thing about the river is that there's always wildlife you can get quite close up to and enjoy, like these ducks. The black-headed gulls are great fun as well, watching them. And you can see, who doesn't walk away from a walk feeling a lot better for seeing some little ducklings, eh? And you can get close to other things. You might not want to get too close to a swan. I know they can feel a bit aggressive, but they're pretty cool as long as you're sort of chilled with them, if that makes sense. Like, they're quite defensive swans, but if you're relaxed and just sit there, like I said, if you allow nature to come to you, it's a much more rewarding experience. And you can see, the swan he's coming right up close. He's totally unfussed by me being there, which is great. And you can see how relaxed they are there with their little young one, which is just fantastic. And that's what it's about, really. It's about that approach of allowing wild nature to come to you, and you just sit and enjoy it, which is what these walks are all about. Grey wagtail. Look, you always want to call it a yellow wagtail, but it's a grey wagtail. Sort of not an unfair name, I think, because they're great. And these can nest in bridges and little cracks in. I've seen them nest in cracks in weirs before, and they're really quite a cool bird to see prancing around. Now, one of our really underrated riverside birds is the dipper. And I absolutely love them. You'll see them bobbing along, and you'll see them along the river wharf pretty much wherever you go, and they're a really good bird to see in Yorkshire. I didn't see them. I don't think I'd actually ever seen a dipper before I moved to Yorkshire, actually. So you know, and now you can see them fairly easy, but they're really, really cracking birds. Here's one bringing back some snacks for its young, and if you're really lucky, you might see a fledgling. You can see them from early spring into early summer as well, actually, these fledglings. I always think they kind of almost look bigger than their parents, actually. Really bright beak when they open up their beak, calling for some more food. And obviously we've got the usual suspects, the herons, sometimes fishing on the banks, sometimes flying overhead. And the other visitors, great visitors, martins, nesting in the banks, in the soft banks, and they're great, and they'll kind of disappear for a bit, and then you'll see them loads. They'll very much part of the flock. They'll go out and feed and then come back to their nest, and there will be a rush hour rushing into the banks and feeding their young, and then they'll all be off again, and they're fantastic to watch. They really are absolute joy to watch sand martins. And it's not just all about riverside birds. We'll often encounter other birds like the nuthatch again. One of the birds that I really enjoyed seeing on our one of our Kingfisher walks was the goldcrest that came right, you know, almost reach out and grab it. It was beautiful. And yeah, so they butterflies as well. So we walked through some flower meadows, which are really good for butterflies. Actually, that section of that we walked at is really, if you get the timing right, you can just sort of get that sense of plumes of butterflies, which it must have been like in the days of, you know, old style farming, when you've got all these butterflies and flying around. It's great. And one other resident that is actually part of the river but not on the river is the oyster catcher, who sometimes I'm not sure I was there. I'm not sure I went and visited last year, actually, but the year before this is, the oyster catchers nested on the on the leisure centre roof, which was fantastic. Really good for keeping it away from predators, obviously. They obviously have to get down. It's a bit of a learning to fly the hard way, I think. But that's great. Seeing that and seeing the young on the rooftop is great. And obviously one of the stars of the show is the kingfisher, which we usually get glimpses of, and then sometimes hopefully actually get to enjoy watching fishing. If you get the timing right and you find the right perch, you can see them fishing, which is great, as long as they're not disturbed. Yeah, it's not, what can I say about seeing a kingfisher? It's always exciting, no matter how many times you see them. They're just very special birds that everyone holds dear to their heart. And as that sunlight goes down on another part of our walk, where we're looking for otters, we combine that with a bat walk as well. So we tend to go out in the late evening. We'll still see those usual suspects, hopefully kingfisher, certainly dippers, maybe heron. Sometimes we see tawnies as well. Quite often we'll see tawnies flying around or starting to warm up as the sun goes down, and we'll get the bat detector out and listen for bats, whilst also keeping an eye out for otters as well. And I think, let me see if I can remember. So common pipistrelle, soprano pipistrelle, Dor Bentons, which are the exciting ones because you can see them flying over the water, hoovering up insects. They're a great one, and you can usually see that because it's just enough light enough to see them hovering over there, and nocturals as well. So those are the bats that I think we can remember. And so it's always fun seeing how many different species you can't hear them with your ears, but you can hear them with a bat detector, and you can, like I say, you can usually see them. And nocturals you can see flying overhead, which is quite cool. And then obviously, if you're really lucky, you get to see an otter as well. Like I say, we don't always see an otter, but what we look at is the habitats and the habits of them. And with all of these species, really, I think it's, it's an hour, 2 hour walk. We could do a 2 hour walk, really. And that's a small slice of time. But what you walk away with is this idea of how to approach things and what to look for, what to recognize. And if you took that approach and did it, if you took, even if you did a few hours a day for 7 days, there's a good chance that you really are improving your chances. So that's the kind of idea with it. So, if you're lucky, if we're really lucky, we get away with it. If we're not, we can walk away and put ourselves in a better position in the future. Some people can sit down all day and wait for something to happen, and other people can't. That's depends on the situation and your personality and stuff. But the more you're out there, the more aware you are of your surroundings, the more chances there are of you encountering something special, like an otter, which is. So we're getting towards an end now. Here's a secret one, which isn't on the nature walks, and it's kind of an idea. So I do secret wonders. If you're on the mailing list, you get invited to the secret wonders with a camera, and this is Timble. There you go. It's not a secret anymore. But there's certain spots on Timble's an amazing environment, and full of really exciting, loads of insects and lots of other interesting things as well. It's a really exciting, but what I'm just going to share with you now is the actual damsel and dragonflies on an early summer morning, capturing the morning dew here. And so this will be, so quite funny enough, the secret wonders quite often develop into other things. So they're almost like, they're almost like experiments. They're sort of ideas that think, oh, it'd be nice to do that. Let's do it as a secret wonder with a few people, and then see how that goes, and maybe develop it into something, a more formal workshop, if you like. And this is one of these works in progress, because Timble, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to, there's a lot of species, there's a lot of different habitats again. But one of the real treasures is these damsel and dragonflies that you can see there, and it's a really quite cool environment to just sit and or stand or walk, or just to observe. And it really is full of life. It really is. So we're moving on to the last one now. And this is one I was gutted to miss, because we were going to do it in January at Bempton. And, Bempton is really overlooked in the winter time. and even in the early spring. And well, you know, outside of the sort of late spring and summer, it's quite overlooked by a lot of people, but it's still a really exciting environment to see and absorb wildlife throughout the year, really. And I'll show you, hopefully I'll show you why. So the way the land's worked by the RSPB is really sympathetic to nature. So you already get a real diverse an eclectic range of wildlife and large flocks of birds, which is fantastic to watch. And you don't see this in the summer and the spring because they're all pairing off and breeding. So you get to enjoy these flocks of birds, which I absolutely love. I think it's one of my favorite things. It's great watching birds and flocks of birds in the winter and the autumn. I love it. And everywhere where you get those kind of flocks of birds, the predators aren't too far behind, including peregrine falcons. And you get deer. So this isn't in the winter. It's got a summer coat. You can see the gingery coat, but you do see deer all year round at Bempton, as well as hare. You can see all year round at Bempton as well. Now, Bempton is a very good place to see tree sparrows. They're quite, you know, you can get quite close to them as well. They're not too bothered. Like I said, they're always busy gathering things, causing sort of mayhem, twitchy feet, never stop. Linnets as well. There's loads and loads, and there's stone chat. You also get buntings, reed buntings. There's a whole array of birds and wildlife that you can see all year round, including the kestrel as well. But one of the real specialists, one of the reasons I like to go in the winter is because quite often you'll get a short-eared owl, 1, 2. I've been there before where there's been 4, and they hunt during the day. And they're fantastic, and they're one of these birds. So if you're standing still, I guess the core message of what I've been saying, if you stand still and just wait, you can just watch a short-eared owl hunting, and it's a pure joy to watch them. And they'll just hover over and dive, and they'll cover a good amount of distance. So, you know, just sit, stand, watch, and appreciate. Real stunning winter specialist, particularly at Bempton Cliffs. So it's a real fantastic bird, and that's one of the key reasons why I do it in the winter. And as well as the short-eared owls and the kestrels, there's a good chance you'll see a barn owl as well. But we still get the seabirds in the winter. You'll still see a good chance of seeing falmer doing their kind of noisy thing that they do. Their flights are fantastic. They're just so at one in the air, and they have this real albatrossy kind of look for me. And they really are boisterous, noisy, flighty, and just really exciting to watch. Actually, they really are. They're great birds. One of my favourite seabirds is the falmer. And if you watched my talk on the Bempton Cliffs, you will know that out of that tube on the top of its beak, it will fire a sort of sticky, stinky acid at predators or things that annoy it too much. I've never seen it happen myself, but I hope in one day I might see and get a shot of it shooting out of its nose. That would be good. You can still see the gannets in the winter there as well, particularly towards the end of winter and as spring approaches. You'll still see them on the cliffs, and on windy days flying past, an eye-to-eye experience, which is fantastic. So they come in, and they really are huge birds, really huge birds, and they're great to photograph, and just even better just to sit and watch and absorb. So why is there no puffins? Because the puffins aren't there when we go there, because the puffins, I just you know, when I go to Bempton during the puffins, we got to have a camera, and we're talking about cameras and equipment. So that's why there's no puffins in that part. We don't do walks with nature. Maybe we will, but I struggle because I love photographing puffins at Bempton, which is what I will be doing this summer as well, touch wood and all that. So that is the end of my walks with nature. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that gave you a good overview of what a walk with nature is about, and I hope you join me. I'll put up a link for the walks with nature at the end. This is my last talk for a while. It won't be the last one, but I need a bit of a break to catch up with other things. Like I say, I want to keep it going. I kind of want to keep developing how I talk on Zoom, on live stream, and I will be updating the YouTube channel with videos, with tutorials and things like that as well. So thank you for joining me over the last few weeks, and I hope you've enjoyed it and you've got stuff from it. And please comment underneath the video, underneath the stream, with any questions you have. And thanks so much for the engagement. It's been really great having your comments and hearing your feedback on stuff. And the more you do that, the more I'll refine it, the more topics I can cover for you guys. And yeah, so thanks so much, and I will see you soon.